Hello again. This is In Conservation With. My name is David Lindo, also known as the Urban Birder. And this recording will be available on YouTube on my channel, The Urban Birder World. And if you are watching this from that channel, please like and subscribe and check out the scores of other conversations I've had with loads of different people, because In Conservation With, it's a series of conversations I have with people within the world of conservation, movers and shakers within that world. And one such mover is Gina Nichol, who's with me today. Gina, how are you and where are you?
Fun. World.
You know, Gina, sorry, I can't hear you now. After talking to you so wonderfully before pressing the record button, it's now gone all weird. I don't know if anyone else can hear. Your voice has gone.
Shall I put
That's it.
on?
That's it. I can hear you now.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
So let's start
Um,
again. How are you and where are you, Gina?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited because I see some of my peeps in the audience here. I am coming to you from the world headquarters of Sunrise Birding in Branford, Connecticut, beautiful Branford, Connecticut, on a gorgeous blue sky, almost winter day, very cold outside. But feeling very warm in my heart to see everybody here. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you. I mean, you have quite a long CV in terms of how you got into nature and what have you, but I think you'll be telling us anyway, so I won't bother to go through it right now. But you and I have known each other for a little while. I mean, like most of my guests, actually, I seem to know most people. I must have a big phone book actually, because people I have on this show I tend to know. But well, I can't remember the first time I met you, Gina. Was it at the British Birdwatching Fair, BC, before COVID?
It was probably 2018, 2017, maybe. And I was really interested in meeting you because I had heard about your connection with Serbia and the owls in Serbia in winter, and I wanted to know more about it. And so I'd been going to the bird fair for years, and finally we met.
Absolutely, and the rest is history, as they say, of course.
For
Um,
sure.
yeah, and Serbia, actually, I just come back from there, and it's one of my favorite tours, actually, because I can never get enough of seeing those owls. It's absolutely amazing. And for those who haven't been, you should get yourself out there with me, of course. But we're going to be talking about the actual wildlife tour industry, because I'm really fascinated in terms of how it works elsewhere in the world. In the UK, for example, which is where I'm based, I mean, I do tours, but a lot of my tours are actually through other people, and I'm not an actual tour company per se. So it kind of makes it more interesting to learn about how these operations work, because in the UK, for example, you're not allowed um, by law to offer tours, or should I say more than one element of a tour, if you are not protected, if you haven't got licenses like, Atoll and other licenses and bonds to protect the money of the people that actually book with you. So that's why I'm not a tour company. That's why I work with other people who are tour companies, and I'm effectively just sort of parachuted in to lead a tour. But Gina, let me hear about you. I mean, I know you got a little presentation for us, but that talks about you as a youth, doesn't it? And how you got into it, doesn't it?
A little bit later if we need to see some visuals. So I have this company called Sunrise Birding, and a lot of people in the audience have gone on tours with me. And my partner in life and my partner in tour guiding, Steve Bird, I think is on the call, and he's had a big influence on me. But in 2005, I started Sunrise Birding. So that's going on 18, 19 years, quite a long time ago. It's It's the longest I've been doing anything. And it was really a dream that I was chasing. And, you know, thinking about our talk today and thinking about how I got here, I probably was doing birding tours in the 1990s on my own out of interest, going to Costa Rica, going to Panama, going to Trinidad and Tobago, places like that. And I got a real travel bug. And so at the time I was teaching, classroom teaching, which I loved, in a great school down in Greenwich, Connecticut. But I just had this dream, and I started traveling and putting together little groups, friends, and people who wanted trips. And I got this dream that I wanted to do my own tour company in 2005. Well, I really got the idea in 2000 when I went on a tour that was really poorly organized, and I thought, wow, I could do this. I could do better. But prior to that, I knew some other women who had done this. I worked with Margaret Schaefer's husband. She had Caligo Ventures, which was established in 1983. And then my friend Peg Abbott, who I worked with at the National Audubon Society back in the early 90s, had started her own company. So it wasn't an odd thing to think of doing it. You know, I actually didn't know too much about other big tour companies that there were in the US, and I learned about them as I went along. But when I worked for National Audubon in the late 80s, they had me start leading tours for their Travel Odysseys program. And I think that really sealed the deal with my travel bug. You know, I just wanted to go everywhere. So in 2005, I had to leave this wonderful teaching job and follow this dream. And there were people who told me not to do it. They said it's too difficult. There's a lot of competition. You know, you're giving up a good career to go follow this crazy dream. And once you tell me not to do something, it just gives me fuel for my fire to go ahead and do it and make it work. So, you know, there was a lot of work involved in the first few years. Before I left the teaching job, I was researching how to get a federal tax ID and set up a limited liability company, how to register a small business, what kind of insurance I was going to need, you know, getting bank accounts and setting up a website. And I just happened to know how to do websites because that was part of my job at the school as I worked on the school's website. So I had some skills with that, and teaching gives you organizational skills. Then I had to come up with a company name and a logo and a business plan. And the company name is really important. And I thought about a lot of different names. Some of them were already taken by other companies. But I like the idea of the sunrise and the promise of a new day and new beginnings and sort of all the symbolism with sunrise. So it became Sunrise Birding. And then a friend of mine, Julian Hoff, who was birding with me, he's British, by the way, you might know him. He's a graphic artist. And he said, you know, let me see if I can do a logo for you. And he came up with my logo, which I'll show you at some point. Which is a skimmer at sunrise. And so that's a little bit of my spirit bird, I guess. And then I had to come up with a business plan. And I always say we when I talk about sunrise birding, but the buck stops with me. But over the years, I've surrounded myself with some amazing people, with the best local guides I can find, the best leaders that I can find for our trips, the best local operators in the various countries that we go to. And so it is a team effort. And I think the only way that I could do this is with this team of people around me who are providing support in the various areas. So here we are 18 years later with a few really tough years of pandemic. But it's happening, and it's still continuing to happen. And I love what I do, and I love my clients, some of them are here, my travelers. And it's been a dream come true, really, really.
And your clients, what do you actually refer to them as? Do you call them travelers, or what's the noun you use
Um,
to describe them?
I probably say travelers, which has a different meaning in England, doesn't it? Travelers
No,
has a different meaning. Most of them really are friends. I mean, we become friends because we share such amazing experience. And I call them clients, but mostly they're our travelers.
yeah. Now, the question I've always wanted to know the answer to, and even though I am one myself, but what makes a good guide? Because you get these situations, and I think you kind of hinted at it earlier, where you go on a tour with someone and it's absolutely rubbish because it's been really badly organized. And I've found that my one of my rules now is if I ever go on a tour with someone else, and it's normally when I go on like a press trip or something, you're led by someone, and often that person is a bird watcher or or an ornithologist. That person is not a guide, if you know what I'm saying, because you find yourself in a situation where they are treating you how they treat themselves, i.e., they go out all day with nothing, no, not even a glass of water. I remember one time I went to the Azores and I had a guide, and I won't mention who he is, but maybe if you kind of put two and two together, some people might work it out if they know the Azores. But I remember turning up and I said to this guy, I said, listen, I know the Azores in the middle of the Atlantic is a great place for migrating or vagrant American birds, but I'm not here for that. I want to see the countryside. I want to see what we bump into. I don't want to be going twitching. And then 5 minutes later, we're looking for a pied-billed grebe at some lake. And it kind of deteriorated from there. And then one point I was with him and he was going to take me to a location. And he said to me, well, actually, I'm going to take you there, drop you off, and then I'm going to go off because there's a white rump sandpiper. And I said to him, hang on a minute, is this your tour? Are you guiding me or is this all about you? I said, and I basically tore a strip off him, and he didn't go, but he didn't speak to me for 45 minutes. He just drove me to wherever I was going in silence. So basically, my question is, I think some people have designs or dreams to be leading tours, but I think they're thinking more about going to all these exotic locations so they can watch birds for themselves. Some people. What do you think? What do you look for when you actually decide on? Well, I guess in your instance, it's a leader. What qualities do you look for?
Great question and an important question in this industry. Of course, they have to know the birds. They have to know how to identify them, but more importantly, how to point them out to people so that the travelers, the clients see them. It's all about the client experience. And so if someone really is in it for improving their life list, that's a low on the scale of the qualities that they need to have. They need to have a good personality. They need to be patient. They need to be able to read people, see what people's needs are, and see how they're being met. And actually, when I think about this, teaching was a good training for that because I would stand in front of a class of 20 students and I'd be able to see each and every one of them and what they were doing and what they needed and what they were getting out of it. And that I find is very important. It's very important. And so when people sign up for our tours on the registration form, I ask them what their goals are, what they want to get out of the tour. And I actually look at that to make sure that what they want is what they're going to get from this tour. We've come a long way from the days where the idea of the tour, the point of the tour was to generate a huge list of birds. We did Costa Rica tours where we were approaching 600 species in 3 weeks. But people would see something fly away and that would go on the list. That's not what we do now. We want people to have a good experience. We want them to see the bird and remember the sighting if they can, if it's a good sighting. And so it's all about the client experience. So a guide needs to really be tuned into that. And we actually have a 6 or 7 page document that goes to all my tour leaders again and again before every tour, reminding them what the tour leader responsibilities are. They involve, making sure everyone's safe, making sure everyone's involved, making sure you're not showing favoritism to 1 or 2 people on the tour. And we ask for feedback from our clients, our travelers, so that we know that the tour leader is living up to the expectations that we have for them and that the travelers have for them.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you talk about the idea that there should be no favoritism, for me, that's common sense. But I remember getting such instructions when I worked with a North American company, and it suddenly made me think. And I was much more aware of it. And when I was with the group, there were 1 or 2 that would sidle up to you and they become like teacher's pet almost. I mean, I remember one person who could barely walk was saying, "Oh, do you want me to go and get you something?" And I was thinking, you don't have to do anything. Oh, it's for me to get it for you, not the other way around. So sometimes it is something that you need to really keep an eye on. And there's always, I mean, a friend of mine wrote a book, Confessions of a Tour Guide, and he intimated certain situations where things could have been inappropriate, where clients were coming on to the tour leader or vice versa. I'm not saying you personally, but have you ever heard of anything like that happen?
Really? No. I mostly Steve Bird and I lead our trips together, so that kind of thing is never going to happen in my situation. I know that people get crushes on the guide because you're having an amazing experience and this person is showing you everything and they seem to know everything. But I've never had or had to address that kind of a situation. Lots of other situations had to be addressed, but not something like that.
Yeah, I've had a couple of situations like that potentially nearly occur to me, mostly actually early on in my career as a guide, when people kind of make suggestions or say stuff that kind of think, yeah, okay, well, we'll leave that one there, so. But going back to leaders again, so you say, someone has to be able to identify birds and have a good way with people and stuff. So I guess you kind of watched them before you picked them.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a new guide in Costa Rica. Well, he's not new anymore, about 4 years ago, and he came highly recommended to us. He's a local guide in Costa Rica. Fantastic. And he came on good recommendation, but I still wanted to go on a tour with him and make sure that everything I was hearing was true, and it is. And he's now leading all of our Costa Rica tours. He's just incredible. He ticks all the boxes of being a great tour leader, taking care of people, making sure all the details are covered, handling anything that comes up. And so yeah, I guess we vet our leaders, our local guides, as well as the guides that work for Sunrise Birding.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, is we always, as much as we can, use local guides in the country where we're going to. That's really important for a lot of reasons. Everything from they are there every day. They know what species is where. They know the calls, which it's hard for us going all over the world to really know the calls like an expert would know. But also, this is their livelihood, and we can support that. We can support conservation of the birds because this local guide is going to want to bring groups back to see these birds. So their efforts are focused on protecting the birds and protecting the places where the birds are. So, the local guides are really, really important to us, and we've tried to also use in-country operators. that are based in the country where the tour is. And you can use operators that are based in other countries, but I think, again, for the conservation element and for the financial support element, putting the money back into the country where you're going to is really important for us.
No, I totally agree about feeding the local economy because certainly in the UK, there's a couple of organisations that have been kind of the famous for not supporting local economies at all. And I think, as you say, I agree with using local people because they know best. Simple as. Yeah. Um, Going back to tours in tropical places. I mean, when I lead tours, I'm not interested in a number of birds. I'm not interested. I'm more interested in, as you say, the experience and for people to remember not only the birds and where they saw them and the other wildlife, but also to have a good time, to learn more about the cuisine and the culture of the country. But what I found, especially like in the last 10 years, or maybe certainly 10 years ago and up until quite recently, maybe even still going on, is that when you go to some of these countries like Brazil, South America, Central America, and even in Africa and Asia, in the subtropical and tropical areas, the guides the local guides seem to think that the currency of being a good guide is the number of birds and other wildlife they can show you. And I keep on saying to people, I'm not interested. Please do not beat yourself up if you didn't show us that whatever. It doesn't matter because whatever we see, we see, and whatever we hear, we hear. Do you find that? And if so, why do you think these guides are so hell-bent on thinking that it's the number of birds that you see that actually or species you see that actually counts?
Well, for some people, that's true. Some people want to go to a country and see as many species as they possibly can on a trip. Those people have different goals than the people that come on our trips. We want to see as much as we can, and for sure, if there are endemics or special species, we want to try and see them. But we're not interested in the highest number count of birds. We're interested more in the experience. So it's possible that local guides that get caught up in that, have worked for other companies where the number is the measure of success of the tour. And so I think that's why it's important. And we always do have a conversation with the guide ahead of time and say, this is what we want, this is what we're after. Definitely want any endemics or special species, and then everything else falls into place. And so we go from maybe approaching 600 birds in Costa Rica in 3 weeks to maybe 400 birds, but we've seen them all well, and most everyone in the group has seen them. So that's kind of, and if you want the 600 birds in 3 weeks in Costa Rica, you need to go on a trip where that is the focus. But we've definitely moved away from that.
So what do most people want when they go on a tour? Because I often wonder myself. I mean, I have people come on tours and they have specific things they want to see, but most people are saying, "Oh, I'm just happy to be here." Do you find that as well?
Yeah, it's a mix. I think people definitely want to see the special species that they can only see. Like when we go to Jamaica, there's 28 or 29 endemics. They want to see those. And then other species, it's great too. But I think for a lot of birders, they want to, add to their life list for sure. They might want to see spectacles. So we just came back from Panama watching the spectacle of the raptor migration over Canopy Tower, maybe 1 million birds passing over as you're up at the top of the tower. So what I found interestingly since the pandemic is a lot of people are just happy to be here. We were stuck for a few years. We couldn't go anywhere. And things happen on tours and they don't, you can't get to where you're supposed to get to. And my clients, they kind of carry me through that because I want to give them everything that they paid for, everything they expect. And, we can't get to some place. And they're like, that's okay. We're having a great time, So I think I'm really fortunate in that I have great clients. They are really, I don't know what it is that attracts them to me, but really nice people. I rarely have any problems with clients. I think maybe because we vet them a little bit and make sure that someone who wants to get a high number of species, we tell them that's kind of not what you're going to get on this tour, you know. So we vet them a little bit. And that's important because if you get the wrong person on a tour, it can be problematic, as I'm sure you've probably um, experienced.
Yeah. Do you well, in Europe, I mean, I'm based in Spain. I my tours I do, I'd say 80% of the people are from the UK and the remainder could be from anywhere. But when I travel around Europe, even when I'm not touring, just doing my normal thing, I've noted that certain nationalities have reputations. So, and I don't want to be, by the way, I'm saying this now, and I'm not saying I endorse it or, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just basically repeating some of the classic things I've heard. For example, in Spain, a lot of people I speak to in the travel, not a lot, but quite a few of the people I speak to in the travel industry often say that people from Northern Europe tend not to spend much money. Places like Netherlands, Germany, they would rather drive their RV and stay um, and stay in their RV and not pay for any accommodation. And they say that English travelers can be quite arrogant and often when you ask them, "Are you having a good time?" And if they say, "Yeah, it's good," then you must take it a couple of pegs lower than what they actually mean. And you'll often hear about it when they write back to you with the tour survey. And also, as someone, excuse me, as Joe Seal pointed out, I mean, I wouldn't say that Americans are seen as obnoxious, but in Europe, anyway, the experience I've had in terms of people talking to me about American clients, for example, is that they are very kind of, I want this and I want that. Um, but these are all generalizations. Do you kind of see the same thing over on your side of the pond? Are they kind of, certain nationalities that kind of make you think, oh no, we might have problems? You're
Um,
sound okay.
I spent a lot of time um, co-leading with Steve when he had his British companies and leading with them and leading with Americans. I didn't really see any kind of stereotypical behavior. I will say that probably the British were maybe more prepared and they knew what birds they wanted to see. Um, and that is a difference that I see. Although there's plenty of American clients that are super prepared when they come on my trips. So I I haven't seen that, and if people, I take everything at face value. So if someone is not having a good time but telling me that they are, that's all I can go on. I'm not a mind reader. So, I need people to be straight with me. It's very interesting as I was sort of thinking about this and thinking about the birding tour industry in the US. There's like 45 million birders in the US. A lot of birders, a lot of birders. And there was a study recently, 56% of them are women. So it's very interesting that there seem to be a lot more women in the US that are birders and even traveling on birding tours. And when I started, my very first tours were all women clients with me. So that was really interesting. And I would say, why do you want to come with us? And they would say, because you're a woman. um, Something about bad experiences with male tour leaders, I don't know, but I thought that was really, really interesting. Now, we were in Ghana scouting a trip a few weeks ago, and we ran into this group of men from the Netherlands. And it was really funny because we ran into them a few times and their leader kept saying, well, you have, referring to me, you have this woman with you. This woman, there's a woman in your group. There were just three of us. And I finally said, I said, are there a lot of women birders in the Netherlands? And he said, not really, maybe 1 in 10. I said, oh, that's why it's so unique to him that there's a woman birding in Ghana. So that's a little bit interesting. I think I've probably seen more of that kind of thing than than stereotypical personalities. I find a lot of people from everywhere are the same and they want the same thing,
Yeah.
or they have the same needs, I should say.
Yeah, I think so too. I think often these stereotypes are perpetrated because of sometimes laziness. They kind of just, it's just, oh, they're English, therefore this is what we need to expect, you know. And as I say, I mean, it's not something I endorse at all. But it's interesting, the gender breakdown, because for example, when I lead my tours, or even day courses or day trips, the majority of people are women, and my tours as well. But you're right, places like the Netherlands, Germany, hell of a lot more men birding than there are women. In the UK, I would have, well, again, I'm going on supposition here, but I think there's probably edging more women now than there were before, because I go to nature reserves and I see, you know, several women walking together or with a couple of guys. So it seems to be that, you know, that could be a thing really. And also maybe there is some sort of situations with men, because I've led women who have told me that they've gone on tour. I mean, one woman in particular did a day trip with a guide in Barcelona, and he also had another client who was a male, and he basically was speaking to the guy the whole time, and he would ignore anything she said, and then suddenly, like when the clock was finished, he said, right, I'm done. And he just left them wherever they were and went. So they had a really bad, she had a really bad experience. And I guess that kind of flavored her view. But I think, again, knowing the guides that I know, they're all mostly very nice people who treat everyone equally. So, yeah, it's interesting, that concept, that whole concept of gender. The other thing that interests me about tours and companies and stuff, I mean, in the UK, for example, there's a lot of wildlife companies or tour companies. And there's quite a few kind of birding companies, and some of them really cater for hardcore twitchers or hardcore people who want to get a big list. But the majority are now going for this easy birding, which is, you know, come along on a tour and, you know, it's much more kind of relaxed. But there seemed to be this thing I've noticed, because I found it very hard, for example, when I first started marketing Serbia. 12 years ago, no one wanted to come. I almost had to pay people to come because it was off the beaten track. Everyone went to all the classic places. I mean, even Extremadura, you know, everyone went to all the places that people knew already, Lesbos. Do you find that people are more adventurous, or are they all going to places that they know other people have gone to?
I was thinking about trends moving forward, and it seems like people are looking for new destinations. I think, I love that we did a tour to Serbia a couple of years ago, and some of your Eastern European places we really would like to bring groups. I think the thing is, it's not in the forefront of people's minds, these places. And the more you can talk about them on social media or sort of articles in the birding magazines or things, just to put the ideas out there. Because, my experience is when people have gone to, say, Costa Rica, they go once, at least Americans do. They go once, they've been to Costa Rica. Now they want to go someplace different, Panama. Now they want to go someplace different, Guatemala. And so if they're really avid travelers, over time, they run out of places to go. And they're looking for new places. And so my job is to try and come up with some new ideas and new places. And honestly, when we started running tours to Lesbos, I think maybe only one other American company was doing it. And we kind of, I feel like we put Lesbos on the map for American birders. And I know some people on the call have been to Lesbos with us, but it just wasn't in the mindset of American birders. And we started going and started publicizing, and I would give talks about Lesbos. I gave talks at the bird fair about Lesbos, which is really funny. What is this American woman doing talking about a Greek island, But it's sort of just putting ideas into people's minds of places where they might want to go. And the world has got a lot of places to go. So offering new opportunities, I think, is important.
I didn't realize there's over or around 45 million birders in the US. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Are most of them just domestic birders? And if so, are they adventurous, or do they all kind of tend to go to Costa Rica and the classic places?
It's a mix. So 45 million bird watchers. This was from a NOAA study quite a long time ago. 20 million of them bird away from home. So that's still a lot, And then some people bird just domestically. They want to work on their North American list. And then some people are more adventurous. So it's a mix. It depends on what people want to do, their comfort level with traveling and so on, and things they want to see.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, what do you think? What do you think is the future in terms of wildlife tours? Because I've been sort of in this business now. I mean, I didn't kind of realize that I was in the travel industry until fairly recently, when I became a member of the British Travel Writers Guild, and suddenly realized, oh, actually, I can speak about travel because I actually do it, because I never sort of thought about it in those terms before. And there's quite a few companies, as I say, certainly in the UK. By the way, how many tour companies are there in the US?
That's a good question, and I haven't checked in recent years. Before the pandemic, I was doing some research, and I think I came up with about 220 different companies. A lot of them very small, and some of the big companies, which a lot of people have heard of. So
And
that's a lot of tour companies.
do the small companies go abroad, or are they kind of
Yeah,
local? They go
yeah,
abroad as well.
yeah. Oh, I'm a small company. I'm a very small company. We do about maybe 20 tours a year. My friend Peg, who I worked with at Audubon and has her own company, she probably does 10 tours a month. That's a big difference. That's a big, big difference. But I've purposely kept sunrise birding small. And I'm wondering whether I'm a control freak, but really to maintain the quality. That's really what I want to do with our tours. So I've kept it small. I had a full-time employee 1 year, the year that we lost money. So that didn't work out very well. I have some part-time help, but I can sort of keep track of everything, and I'm happy with that, you know,
With that
sort of
number of
maintaining.
people, there surely cannot be that number of really good guides out there, because it's a commodity that's hard to come by. I'd say a really good guide or really good leader. Surely it must be
Yeah,
a
well, some guides are really good in their home state or their home area, and then other guides are able to pivot to depending on where they are in the world, and maybe they don't know every bird or every bird call, but they know how to get people on birds and give people a good experience, and that in combination with a good local guide is a really a win-win situation.
yeah.
So,
Because I struggle when I look at the number of tour companies in the UK, and I know that some of the more well-known ones do have really good guides and they do work with good people. But I also, I was looking through online the other day, and I came across companies I never heard of, whose main sort of tour business stuff is really commercial, sightseeing stuff. But then they say, oh, we also do wildlife tours as well. Um, is there a danger that people go to these companies and have a substandard experience, and then they think that's what wildlife tours are?
birders who are birders and their purpose is to see the birds of a certain area will do their due diligence and know, what they're getting into. Maybe not, I don't know. So for example, some of the African safaris, birders can be really frustrated on an African safari because the guide just wants to show them the big five, the mammals and things. And they're like, what's that bird? And the guide either doesn't know or doesn't want to stop and show and talk about that bird. So that's one that you have to be really careful with. If you're a birder going on safari, you want to pick a bird focused safari because the big animals will be there. It's the birds that you have to look a little bit more carefully for.
Yeah, I had an experience actually in Kenya recently. I led essentially a safari. I mean, when I say, well, I did lead it, but we had local guides and they were instructed, we're not chasing after anything. I don't care what it is. We'll just take our time and we'll be birding. And if we come across a rhinoceros, that's great. But at one moment they got carried away and they were steaming down some track at 50 miles an hour and I was going mental. And then that didn't happen again. But I had a terrible experience in India, which actually put me off safaris when I went. I can't remember where I was, but they said that this reserve, which I'd never heard of, wasn't one of the famous ones, had 60 tigers in it. And driving around, it was obvious that there wasn't going to be 60 tigers because there's hardly any, deer there for them to feed on. But the guy was rushing, and I said to him, "Hey, slow down. Have you got a meeting?" No. I said, "Well, slow down. Why are you traveling so fast for?" Because he was just basically bouncing from one bit to another to try and see if he can flush a tiger. Um, do you think that there's also a thing going on where wildlife tourism is painted in this whole sort of light that it's all about these amazing congregations of animals, and you can get on a boat, we'll definitely show you a blue whale, we get up right close to it. I mean, I'll give you another example. Again, in Sri Lanka, I'm showing my group a spider. I happened to bump into a spider, which was quite big, and a couple being guided by a separate guide walked past and they're English. They said to me, "What are you looking at, mate?" I said, "I'm looking at a spider." "Spider? We're going after leopards." And I was thinking, and I see the people in safaris as well, and they're just racing from an elephant to this to that, and they're missing everything in between. And I'm worried that there's the whole essence being lost here because people leave these countries without realizing there's an amazing ecosystem in some of these countries that need protecting.
The tour you choose to go on, some of what's offered are just basically sightseeing tours. I mean, you could go to a safari park in the US and see similar. So, I think the educated consumer has to kind of decide what they want. And if that's what they want, there's plenty of that out there. If they want to see more of the interactions and the whole the bigger picture of an area, look for that kind of a tour. And I think with our tours we do pay attention to the wildflowers. When we do Lesbos this year, we have an orchid extension. We're going a couple days early to look at orchids that are blooming in April. It's amazing. And we just thought people might want to see this. This is incredible. The birds as well as everything else in nature, in the environment there. So you asked me before, I think about the future and trends, and I did make some notes about that because I've been really interested in moving where sunrise birding is going, but also noting the trends that I've seen since the pandemic. And one is for sure smaller groups. People want smaller groups on tours. We used to take as many as 14 people on a tour. Now, really, we limit it to 10. We've taken tours with as few as 2 people. 8 is a perfect size, I think. Economically, 10 is better for us. We've also found birders new to travel coming into our birding tours, and they need some hand holding because a birding tour is different from just a general tour. We've had a lot of requests for private tours, groups of people, or bird clubs, and people wanting to get to their bucket list destinations, and people wanting not high end, but better accommodations and amenities. And that's kind of the trends that I've been seeing in the past few years since we've come out of the pandemic. So interesting.
Yeah, because I mean the Kenya tour I did, I mean that was like $10,000 a head. We were staying mostly mostly in quite reasonable accommodation. And I too have noticed the rise in people wanting private experiences or even solo experiences. I remember a few years ago, I guided for maybe 3 years in a row, Banksy, the artist's ex-manager. And I used to take him. He said, I only want to go to Scotland. I want to go to the middle of Scotland, Highlands and the islands. I don't want to meet anyone. I just want to be out there with you birding. And it was, as he said, I mean, I remember once being in a hide with him. We're watching divers or something, or loons, as you call them. And someone came into the hide, and I turned around and he'd walked out. He just didn't want to know. And I remember one time being in the middle of nowhere in Scotland, walking down a road, and a car drove past and suddenly went, screeched to a halt. Four birders jumped out. Oh, Davey, Davey. And I was like, oh, not here. Excuse me. So, yeah, it's quite interesting when you get, but it's difficult though, isn't it? When you have small groups. I mean, do you actually personally lead, like two people? Because, sometimes you might get people that I mean, how do you handle it when you have people that kind of rub with you a little bit?
So small groups, yes, especially we've taken small groups to destinations where it's our first time. So like Borneo a few years ago, 5 years ago, we had 4 people. And it was great because we got to experience Borneo with the people, and it wasn't a big group to sort of maneuver around. And so we do that. Yeah, it depends on our availability and everything else, but we have done small groups for sure.
Yeah. And it's, how do you, I mean, you have to be a certain kind of person, haven't you, to deal with people generally. And I can see that obviously you are, because I've known you for a long time, but it's not easy sometimes. I mean, I've been led by people or co-led with people who have had people skills that have really been kind of not quite there. And then I think to myself, sometimes have I been too cheeky? It's hard to know where to draw the line, isn't it, in terms of how much of yourself you show your group? Because sometimes you, I mean, there was one example when I was in Sri Lanka and I was leading a bunch of people, and we went into a wood that had leeches. So we were wearing our leech trousers to find some thrush. And then we came out of the wood, and we were taking off our trousers, our bleach pants, whatever you. And one of the clients who's quite cheeky, he had a leech on his trousers, and he was about to flick it on me. Well, it seemed as if he was. And before I knew it, the London Street Lindo came out, replete with profanities. Um, and then I suddenly stopped myself. I thought, oh God. And then I've never been able to live that down since with that particular guy. I mean, he's been on several tours since, but yeah, sometimes it's hard to because you're dealing with lots of different characters, aren't you? And
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
what
different personalities.
yeah, to
Yeah, for sure.
what advice do you give leaders in terms of dealing with, there might be someone who's a bit kind of, you know, cheeky or leery or whatever you want to call it.
I would say address it right away. The longer you leave something like that, the longer it becomes, the more awkward it becomes to deal with it. And so if someone is acting out or causing trouble, try to nip that in the bud, because if it goes on and on, it can be more and more difficult. I have to say, a lot of our clients are return clients, so we already know them. And it's important when we get new people to sort of draw them in so that they feel part of, the club, because we have so many returnees, and we have very good relationships with all of them. So it works out well.
Good. Okay. Well, you know what? Why don't you show us your little PowerPoint?
Oh, right. Okay. Well, let's see. Yeah. All right. Can you see it? Wait a minute.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Okay. All right. Hang on. I'm sharing my screen.
and for
This
those
one.
who are watching now, put yourself on speaker view so you can actually see the whole presentation and not everything.
Okay. So I renamed this talk, David. It's called Following a Dream, Creating a Way to See All the Birds and Wildlife of the World. And that's kind of, I guess, what I did. There we are. There's my logo I was talking about, our logo with the skimmer. And so when I was getting ready for this talk, I found this picture of how it all started. And this is me when I won my first fishing contest, I think around age 6. And I was telling you this story before. I caught this fish about 15 minutes before the contest was over. And so a bunch of kids, mostly boys, sort of carried me and the fish over to where it needed to be measured to see if it was the biggest one. And indeed it was. But in that moment, the moments of bringing me to where the fish was going to be measured, there were boys saying, "Oh my God, a girl caught this? A girl couldn't have caught that. She must have had help." And I think that was the first time I realized that there was this gender thing going on. I never really was aware of it before, and so I just put that picture in of me. So you said you were going to ask me my favorite bird, right?
Yeah.
And so there's 11,000 species of birds in the world, and I'm supposed to pick one. So it's been a little bit of a journey to get there because, of course, the black skimmer is my spirit bird. It's in my logo. I love hummingbirds, and I've had really a lot of opportunities to see a lot of different species of hummingbirds. So yeah, hummingbird. I love owls. And so am I going to pick an owl? Shorebirds. I love shorebirds. So how do I pick one favorite bird? So I went to color, and my favorite color is blue. And there's a lot of blue birds out there, like blue dacnus, this is a picture from our recent Panama tour. Scarlet-eyed dacnus, which I think is a stunning bird. The one I picked was the red-legged honeycreeper because this has different tones of blue. This is a bird that you can see in Central and South America. It does have bright red legs, and it's just a stunner. So today, this is my favorite bird. And then you said you were going to ask me my favorite place to bird. So again, 200 countries. I've got to pick one, and I really couldn't pick one because I go to Lesbos, the Greek island, quite a lot. It's a second home to me. It's wonderful to go there and see the spring migration and also the orchids. So it's between Lesbos and Costa Rica. And I think you've been to Costa Rica with the colorful tropical birds there. So those are the answers to those most difficult questions. So, thank you.
Okay, well, that's good. That's the most original way anyone's ever answered those questions. So I've got to hand it to you, Gina. Okay, well, I just want to tell everyone listening and watching that we have some more in conservation moves coming up real soon, including one next Monday, which I'm really, really interested and excited about. And it's with the great and venerable Ken Kaufman, who in America is one of the GODs when it comes to ornithology. And we're talking about the fact that the American Ornithological Society are going to be renaming all the birds that have been named after people. Now, Gina, What do you think about that?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for putting me before Ken Kaufman, because he is a god and it's going to be great. And if I weren't on my way to England on Monday for Christmas, I'd be watching it. So I'll have to watch the recorded version. I've been thinking about this, and probably 30 or 40 years ago when they changed the name of long-tailed duck, remember?
Old school.
Yes, they changed it to long-tailed duck, and it was one of a few changes that year. But I knew ever since then that the idea was to change all of the bird names to take out people's names. It's probably okay to do that. Then they have to go into the scientific names as well, because there are a lot of people's names in scientific names. So it's a big, big project, but it's getting airtime again 30 to 40 years later, you know, when it has been talked about for a long time. So it'll be very interesting to see what Ken has to say about it.
Yeah, exactly. And the other things coming up also this year, because there's only a couple of weeks left of this year, really. Mark Thomas from the RSPB is talking about the bird crime report, and that's going to be on Tuesday the 19th, so basically next Tuesday. And then we will talk about all the in conservation myths coming up in 2024, towards the end of this year, maybe next week. All right, so Gina, it's been really fascinating and interesting talking about the tour company world or the tourism industry, the wildlife tourism industry in the US. I'm sure that there'll be a few questions coming up next in the Q&A. And for those who are wondering, how can I see the Q&A? Well, if you become a member of the Urban Bird of the World community, then you can, because it's a perk for anyone that joins the community. Gina, again, thank you for sparing the afternoon and telling us about your experiences in the wildlife travel industry.
It's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate everybody who's been here to listen today. So, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
And thank you, Gina. And Gina's right. Thank you, Zoomers, for all being here as well, and supporting the cause and also listening to this hopefully interesting conversation. So until I see you again, keep looking up.